Welcome to The Collective, where every conversation ignites a new perspective. Join us as we delve into the journeys of remarkable individuals, explore the art of growth, resilience, and the power of a shared mission as we strive to be better together. Hey everybody, welcome back to The Collective. We have another fantastic show for you planned out today, and I am super excited. We got Greg rejoining us, we got Travis rejoining us, we got Josh rejoining us, we got Sean and myself as always, and while I am stoked, y'all should be too. Do the things, like the show, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, do all that good stuff, get your emails whenever we go live, which is of course Fridays for The Collective and Wednesdays for The Gold Mine. If you have any thoughts, questions, comments, anything at all, put them up in the comment section. We can hit those throughout the show. And then we're gonna get into some intros here in a second. We're gonna be talking about talent. And I'm excited to see everybody's thoughts on this because I think it's gonna go in really weird directions. So, Greg, why don't you give us a quick 10 to 15 seconds? Who are you? Where you come from? All that good stuff.
Greg Everett. I'm in Central Oregon now. I coach competitive Olympic style weightlifters for the better part of 20 years at this point, and I put out educational information for said weightlifters and coaches primarily. And so at this point, I'm just trying to keep doing that as long as people will still listen to me, so I don't have to be a Walmart greeter until I'm 85.
Bam. I love it. Josh, how about yourself?
Josh Tyler, I'm here in Central Virginia. I'm a former professional MMA fighter, a BJJ black belt. I own a company called Savage Gentleman where we make different goods, wallets and leather and apparel for men, savages, and ideally also gentlemen. And we also do some, for lack of a better term, men's work, just in the space of helping guys reach their full potential and whatever that looks like, in the context of either being a savage or a gentleman, or ideally both.
Bam. I like it. I've been playing on your website the last little while, and I think you got some really neat stuff going on there. I'm
Thanks,
really
man.
excited to see where that goes. Travis, how about yourself?
Travis Bader. I am the host of the Silvercore podcast. I own a company called Silvercore Outdoors, coming in from the lower mainland of beautiful British Columbia. And I'm on my phone this time, so we'll see what happens. Halfway through, I'll switch through to my laptop.
We'll get the luxurious voice through the whole setup once again. I like it. Sean, how's the mountains treating you?
Things are good out here. I'm really looking forward to the conversation. So my son, just before I came into my office, said, "Hey, what's the podcast on?" And I said, "Talent." And guess what? There's 3 super talented guys that are on the show, so it should be a good combo. So that's where my head's at. Let's see where it goes.
Absolutely. So let me give you a quick little rundown of why I picked this off in terms of topic. And I was looking at the guest list and I was like, ooh, these guys all have great lineages of training themselves, but also training other people and being around people who are training and learning and developing. And I thought to myself, you know, what haven't we talked about that would put all these things together? And I started thinking about the fact that I always thought I had an innate talent to pick up on things quickly. You show me how to do something once or twice, I could pick up on it and to a reasonable degree do it pretty well, very quickly, faster than most of my peers. And I was like, that seems to me like a pretty good talent to have. But then I wondered, where else would that apply? How else do other people see it? I wonder, do other people see that they have their own personal talent, or do they see it in other people? So let's get it started. Josh, when you saw the topic of talent, what was your first thoughts?
Initially, because it said something about, what is needed beyond talent, I think was somewhere there in the verbiage, right? And I think that is important. Obviously, it's difficult to accomplish things without some amount of effort and energy. But I think we can also take that too far to the extent of saying, well, if I just work hard at this thing, I can be talented at it. And I think it's important to recognize that that's not always true. You can't teach a shark to climb a tree, nor should you, right? And so the idea of talent, I think, is not that we develop or cultivate it. I think it's actually more a matter of uncovering, but we uncover it through experience, right? And as we explore the world, it's not that we necessarily get better at something. I mean, we do in a sense as we practice and learn, but I think you already have as much of the thing that you It's accessible to you right now. It's just a process of realizing it. And again, we realize it through doing it, through experience.
Yeah, absolutely. This is we're already going down a realm that I want to take us down. So I'm going to come back to that in a second. Travis, you got your first thoughts on talent?
Yeah, first thoughts. I think you kind of presuppose the direction of the conversation through the Instagram post that you put out. But my personal thoughts are aside. I don't want to diminish the rare instances where you're going to have genetic abilities. You're going to be a savant. You're going to be genetically predisposed to have extra cardiovascular endurance or strength, and that could all play into what people generally view as talent. But in my opinion, talent is a lot like luck. And where people say, Trav, you sure are lucky. And I say, yeah, I mean, it's only taken me so many years to be as lucky as I am. I don't think, for the most part, talent is something that is just gifted upon somebody. It's something that requires exertion and effort. For the head may conceive, the heart may devise. All is for naught if the hand isn't quick to enact on the design.
Bam. Always with the quotes. I'm loving that. Greg, you got,
I got
what are your
very
first
poetic
thoughts?
at the end there.
Right?
I'm gonna kind of synthesize the two, because I agree to some extent with both of these guys. And I would say, first and foremost, there is absolutely an element of talent in everything we do. And by that, I mean a natural aptitude, right? So there is some kind of predisposition to being better at something naturally than the average person. I think where it gets confusing, though, is that the degree of potential aptitude above the average and how big of an effect it has varies greatly based on the activity. So, as an obvious example for me, the sport of Olympic weightlifting, there are absolute freaks of nature who will walk into a gym and, back squat triple body weight with virtually no training, right? It's not something they have spent 20 years working towards. It is something they just have. It is related to proportions and structure, the morphology side of thing. It is related to a natural physiological ability. It's related to kind of a natural sense of confidence, all these elements that would produce some kind of lift like that. Whereas you have other people who are going to work literally for 20 years, day in, day out, no falling off, no regression, and will never achieve those kinds of things that certain people can achieve with little to no work. Now, of course, those are, extreme examples. But what's the classic saying? Hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. But that's the key that people overlook, is the when talent doesn't work hard part. Yeah, you can outwork someone's talent if they are lazy, unambitious, and unmotivated. But the only way to become truly the best you can possibly be at anything is to not only have the talent, but also have the work ethic, the commitment over long term. You have to have all of it working together to get to that highest point. Now, if you are objectively untalented in something, that is not to say that you cannot get better, and in often cases get much better than you are naturally. Of course, that's training, that's practice, that's learning, that's experience. Um, but all things being equal, the more talented person is going to always beat the less talented person. And that's the thing, is I don't say that to be discouraging to people, but people get very unrealistic about it. Like, I'm just, I think was Josh was saying, I'm just going to work so hard, I'll get there. It's like, well, you'll get as close as you possibly can, and that's very admirable. That's a good goal to have, but you also have to be realistic. And typically, what I've found is people, especially in really physical trait dependent sports, uh, the people who will try to convince you that natural talent or genetic predisposition doesn't exist are the ones who have it, and who have been able to capitalize on it, and who have succeeded greatly because of it. And they don't like the idea that any part of their success was not directly from their hard work. And I've coached many lifters who have competed, at the world championship level, national record kind of people, and I see what they do day in, day out over the course of a career. and they're not working that hard. I see people who are struggling day in, day out, just beating their heads against the wall, doing every single possible thing they can do. And they will never even approach that level. So I almost get offended when a really talented person is like, no, that's nonsense. You just you're not willing to work hard enough. It's like, well, must be nice to be able to believe that. I was going somewhere else, more towards Travis's side of things, but I guess my point with regard to Travis was that you do, regardless of your talent level, you do have to emphasize hard work, consistency, commitment, regardless of what you want to do, and now I'm going way far afield, but that's part of the process focus versus outcome focus, and that is how you actually find fulfillment and true success, rather than just like, if I don't get to this specific objective goal, I am a failure.
Yeah.
Cut me
It's
off, Chance, please.
So
yeah, I'm coming. Don't worry. Go ahead, Josh. What do you got?
well, so I have a question. We're kind of just operating under the assumption, one, of the definition of what talent is, and then also that it must be pursued to some conclusion, right? Like, okay, you have a talent. Well, you have a talent for dancing. You've got to become a professional dancer or whatever. And I think that in itself may be, I don't know. I mean, I think it's worth discussing and questioning, right? Just because you have a talent, is it bad to waste it? Do you have to use all of your talents? Right? Which talent are we talking about? And so when we talk about talent, I think maybe we need some operational definitions here as far as what we're actually trying to describe.
Some guidelines. Yeah, I like
Yeah.
it. The
Okay. I want to jump in if I can, Chance.
What do you got?
Sorry. I don't mean to be like beating everybody into submission here, but 100% what Josh is saying is talent has nothing to do with desire or motivation, right? You could be the most talented dancer in the world and think it's the dumbest thing on earth and want nothing to do with it. And I think the problem with the idea of wasting talent is that is other people's perception of your choices, right? So if I see someone who's this supernaturally strong, explosive, mobile person, and they're like, Olympic weightlifting, that's dumb. Why would I do that? I want to be a bowler. Be like, that my initial reaction would be, that's such a waste, because I would kill for those abilities that I didn't have. But at the same time, that's none of my business. If that guy wants to go bowl for the rest of his life and have fun, then that's exactly what he should do. So it shouldn't be considered a waste of talent. I would say it's only a waste of talent if you have the ability, you say that you want to achieve the most in that specific thing, but then you are not willing to actually do the work to get there.
Yeah, that is a big key to this. And
but if you're not willing, I was just gonna say, but if you're not willing to do the work, then do you actually really want to do it? I mean, those who want to do it are doing it. So the people who have the talent say they want to do it, but don't work hard. It's not that it's really just they're being dishonest with themselves or with their coach or whomever.
Yeah. No, I would agree with you on that 100%. Yeah.
This is already going down a really
you can
interesting
certainly
lane.
believe like, I want this. But yeah, I would agree with you 100%, Josh, that if you are not actually willing to do what it takes to achieve that thing you say you want, then yes, I would agree. You don't actually want it.
I'll take that a step further, and I'll say, if you are not actively doing it, because there is no future. Either you are in the practice of the thing or you are not. And so if you're not doing it, then why say that you want to do it? If you say, hey, I want to lose weight, but you're stuffing your face with ohos and ding dongs, then that's fine. I don't care. Then just cut out the extraneous, I want to lose the weight, right? If you are actively trying to lose the weight, then you will be in the process of, and not talking about not future planning, you will be making the improvements. Now, you may be misguided, right? You may not have a good source of information to operate from, and that could be standing in your way, but you should still be working hard. You should be doing whatever it is you believe is the correct thing to the best of your ability. And if you're not, it just means you're lying.
It does feel good to say things like that, and that's a big part of this, right? Like, it feels good to say, I want to lose weight because it's an ideal. It's like a future casting, like you were saying. So there is part of that that allows us to kind of feel good about ourselves that when we say we want something, but I like where you're going with this, the fact that it is just basically a lie. Sean, you got any thoughts on any of this?
I sure do. Quite frankly, I was happy to sit back and enjoy my coffee and listen to the boys get after it because it's a great conversation so far. I don't disagree with anything, but I'll throw in my 2 cents just to see where it goes. I did scribble down something, Chance, and coincidentally, it dovetails into kind of your entry point on talent. You'd said, I believe, I'm paraphrasing here, that when you were coming up in the military, you found, or when you were coming up, you found things generally easier than maybe others. Your talent was think you learned fast or things came to you fast. Am I paraphrasing you correctly?
Yeah, that's about right.
Right on. So I found the same thing as well, and I still find the same thing today. Maybe my greatest talent is that I learn quick. But is it called learning quick, or is it called I get results because I'm curious and I'm passionate about what I'm doing? And so all of the people on this panel right now wouldn't be in the position that they're in right now if they weren't curious about life, if they weren't curious about themselves, curious about the trajectory, and also enough passion to pursue their not knowingness. So that's really key to what I'm about to say. I scribbled this down before the show started, scribbled a few notes down, but this is one specifically that ties directly into what you said at the start, Chance. Here it is. The dark side of talent is that those with natural talent often plateau because they lack the drive to refine it. And, the guys have generally said that. I think Greg crystallized it best. He'd kill to have some of the natural talent that others might have that they don't need to work as hard to produce. And so that's what I've observed throughout my life is I've met a number of talented people that tend to operate in 2 camps at some point in their life. They take it to the extent of their talent, and I love watching that. Or as Josh said, do you have to? Do you have to pursue your talent? Do you have to produce outcomes? No, you don't. That's the other camp. And that's the one that doesn't interest me. Now, I'm not throwing them all under the bus. I'm just saying, if I'm going to watch the big Netflix movie of my life, I'm watching the camp that is producing interesting results through their curiosity and passion. So is talent a simple VO2 marker, a VO2 max marker? How much oxygen capacity you can move in a minute? Is that talent? Or is the talent the curiosity to passionately pursue how much oxygen you can take up in a minute? That's generally where I'm thinking about the conversation is what precedes the understanding of talent.
Interesting. I got a question on this. Travis, you got any? Oh, he's busy on his computer.
No. It was
you
muted.
got?
Sorry about that. I didn't.
Okay.
All right, Chance. I wish I was as talented as you, and I could be a professional podcaster. And Josh, if I was as talented as you, man, I'd probably have a shot at doing some professional MMA. And Greg, Olympic level weightlifting. If only I had your talent. And I could say the same for you, Sean, for special forces and elite level athlete. But damn, if only I had your talent. And as I say that, of course, I say that tongue in cheek because your accomplishments are not without massive efforts that you guys have put in behind it. And I look at, Greg, you're talking about, then you can be a success. Well, what is a success? Earl Nightingale would say success is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. If you are genetically predisposed to be able to lift heavy weights, but that is not an interest for you, then pursuing that is not a success for you. When I look at my kids and they do well in an athletic endeavor or they do well on a test, I never say, wow, you're really smart. Good thing you're so talented. You're able to do so well at this sporting activity. I say, you worked damn hard for the grades you got. Good for you. Keep it up. You've worked really hard to be able to achieve what you've done in whatever sporting event it might be. Because I think it's a folly to dismiss the hard work and effort that is required to achieve success. And sometimes I think it's a demotivating factor to say, well, that person's just talented. And they might be genetically predisposed to be able to do better at a certain activity. But without that struggle that happens for an untalented person, they might not have the experience to develop the systems to develop that resiliency that's required in order to achieve the high level. I don't think special forces generally recruits from talented people. I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Sean, I think special forces will generally recruit from those who are willing to keep pushing and keep persevering despite their difficulties. Yes, being strong, having a high VO2, being intelligent, and having recall can assist in all of that. But if you're not able to put in that hard work and effort, it's all for naught.
This is it's already going deep. I like this. What do you got?
There's a lot
So,
going on there, and
you know-
you nailed multiple things. Oh, sorry, Josh.
Oh, you're
You
fine.
go ahead, Greg. I'll get Josh after. Go ahead.
So the idea that we need to encourage, congratulate, appreciate hard work, absolutely, regardless of who it is. If someone is putting in the work and the effort to pursue something that is meaningful to them, in order to achieve what we would be considering success, based on this definition, which I would totally agree with you, then that does need to be highlighted, regardless of talent level, regardless of the ultimate level they are achieving. That's beside the point. The point is that they are willing to put in the work to pursue this thing that is important to them, right? So they are attempting to succeed according to the definition of that word, in themselves. And I do think it's absolutely demotivating to not give credit for hard work to someone who is naturally talented or has a particular aptitude for something, because that talent maybe helps them, it maybe sets them at a farther starting point, but they're still doing hard work, right? So and I hope that what I said earlier isn't misinterpreted that way is me dismissing their hard work, because that's not at all what I mean. I mean that we can simultaneously appreciate and value hard work while also recognizing the potential benefits and advantages that talent provides somebody. And those are two separate things. And going back real quick to what Josh, you said earlier, and I forget exactly now what it was. There's so much going on. But I think we get into this idea of desire versus hope versus actual motivation. And by motivation, I don't mean enthusiasm. I mean like the underlying reason for you to do something. And that's the dangerous side of it, is hope, or like this really vague desire. Like, I wish I could lose weight, or I hope someday I lose weight. And that's what allows you to keep stuff in the ho-hos in your face, because it's not a true motivation for you. You haven't quite figured out that underlying value and what that means to you. Therefore, you're not able to commit to it. Maybe you don't actually want it. So anyway, just real quick to go back on what Josh said.
Oh, I'm digging it. Josh, what do you got?
So to touch on that, and I had another thought as well. What you're talking about is the conditioning, being conditioned by the external world, and we allow that to influence us in such that a way. I want to be a star quarterback. Why? Well, because my dad was a really good quarterback, and so that's what I want to be, because I want to be like my dad. And maybe that kid does pursue that, and they, because of their genetic ability and because of that influence, they get to be really good at it. But maybe deep down inside, they didn't really care, and they don't pursue it beyond high school. Well, what a waste of talent, right? Well, no, they were being influenced by something different. And so this is where I think it's really important, like self mastery and self knowledge is essential to this, because you end up chasing all of these things, not knowing how or why. And so it gives you this false hope. It actually doesn't matter if you chase something and don't achieve it, as long as you're enjoying the pursuit. Who says that you have to be the best Olympic lifter in the world? If you like putting barbells over your head, right? I don't care if you're doing 100 or 300 pounds. Rock on, man. But we get this, understanding of an external of other people's definition of success. It was like, well, if you're not winning, if you're not competing in it, then you're not really doing it. You're wasting your time. And I think the idea of just doing something for the sheer joy of it, for the sheer learning. I mean, who's more talented, the person who takes the thing that they're good at and becomes the best at it, or a person who takes something that they don't have a natural disposition to and they get pretty okay at it? I don't know, but it begs the question of the definition of talent. And Sean brought this up. Um, he talked about VO2 max, and so where does talent live? Is it something physiological? Is it biology? Does our talent reside in how much blood our heart can pump? Is it psychological? Right? Is it how fast we can process information? Or is it something different? Is talent more related to character? Right? What makes a good Olympic lifter? Yes, being strong, sarcomere, in all of the really biological stuff we want to get into. But I would argue that what makes, and you can, correct me if I'm wrong, what would make a lifter excel, especially in Olympic lifting, is an ability to coordinate muscles together, right? To understand patterns, to understand the nuance and the sensation, right? The sensitivity. And I'd say sensitivity to something is really the definition of talent. It's just a matter of how sensitive am I, right? How sensitive am I to the trigger pull makes me a good shooter? How much can I compensate and adjust for the wind and the different situations? Same thing with fighting. So does talent come from, a mental aspect? Does it come from something within our body? Or is it something different about who we are as an actual person? And so maybe we can play around with that definition a little bit.
I'm loving that sensitivity. That's great. What do you got, Greg?
Yeah, just to address what you were saying is, the problem with it is such a nebulous term and an idea, right? And again, like I said at the outset, there are so many different activities and abilities we could potentially apply this to, and it's going to apply differently. So my natural talent, natural physical ability thing when it comes to very physical sports like weightlifting is, I look at it this way: no matter how good you're training, no matter how much the motivation, all those things, you cannot take a mule and win the Kentucky Derby, right? That you require certain basic materials to work with. But again, what is the sport, or what is the activity that we're talking about? Because if it's a much more skill dependent sport, then you're going to have a totally different set of elements that are at play here. Like, you take shooting, for example. You can have someone who has extremely quick reflexes, but they've got terrible eyesight. And even with corrective glasses, they have trouble tracking, from a target back to front sight focus when moving on multiple targets. Like, I personally have that issue. It's really tough to work with. So it's like there's this endless potential array of pieces here. And I think that's why it's such a difficult conversation, because every single thing you guys have said, I think of 400 other things I want to bring up. And by the time I talk, I forget them all.
Welcome to my world, man. That's why I keep notes.
My talent is not memory.
Well, there you go. Trav, what do you got?
Oh, same thing. That's why I write it all down here. I'm madly writing things down, and I got arrows trying to point, how do I do this in a cohesive way that actually makes sense? But I still stand by my thought that talent is a rare thing. Talent isn't something, from my definition anyways, that most people have. You can have a genetic predisposition to be able to lift big weights. I'm 6'6", I'm 250 pounds. I can do things that somebody smaller than me would have a difficult time doing, and I can do it rather easily. But we also talked about influence. I think that plays a massive role. There's no denying that Mozart is talented, very talented musician, terrible with money, died at around 35, broke, no one knows where, some mass grave somewhere, because he didn't have enough money in his accounts to be able to afford a funeral. But people don't talk about that at age 3, his father started him on a very rigorous training regime. Now, is it talent, or is it all the many hours and hard work you put in. The same can be said for Tiger Woods, very talented golfer, started at a young age with his father putting their influence on it. Or Wayne Gretzky, same sort of thing again. A friend of mine, Joe Appel, played for the Argonauts. He and I went to the same high school. We played football at the same different years. He's a number of years younger than me, but the coaches would tell him the same thing that I was told. I had no idea what I was doing when I played football, but they say, you can't teach big. And so I just go in and I'd hit the person in front of me, and everyone thought that was pretty good. I think that we need to have an idea of what we're talking about when we say talent, and we really need to determine how much of this talent is actually just pure genetic, like you've got it, and how much of it is learned practice over time, whether it comes quicker to you or not, because it is very comparative. Dean Nugent, a buddy of mine, a British Army, he's out climbing with Jace Budd, and Jason's an high-level mountaineer. Girl at the bottom says, oh, you're a rock climber, are you, Dean? He's like, well, no, my buddy up there is. He's, well, you got the helmet, and you're got a harness, and you're attached to a rope, you're a rock climber. So compared to Jace, he's not. Compared to her, he is. Sean, you're a world-class athlete, 24-hour relays. But what about 48-hour relays? Have you done those? I mean, to most people, you're at the pinnacle, but where is that bar? So I think we have to be cautious about how we use the word talent and what we ascribe to talent, and what we can say is, okay, you might have a little bit easier time doing certain things, but how much work and effort is still required to reach the levels where you guys have reached.
This is a beautiful point, and this is why I wanted to have this conversation, because it's such a nebulous concept, and I think every one of us probably has a different definition of what talent is or has been. And before we get into it, I just want to hit on a couple of these comments real fast, so that I feel like we're leaving people behind, because it's a great conversation so far. I just want to jump on this real quick. Micro Gold Oak Talks, morning. Good to see you. John Minari, morning team. There we go. Morning team collective. And then he jumped in. He said, was wasting some talent until I found Team Rubicon, which is an important point that I want to touch on here. Dan Cameron says, I want to be the dog. So Greg, there's somebody that wants to be your dog in the back couch there. But the thing that I want to touch on was this. Was wasting some talent until I found Team Rubicon. A lot of this that we're talking about, I prescribe talent as innate ability. So something that you didn't have to work at, you didn't have to train, you didn't have to develop a skill set in, it just comes to you. One of those things for me was math. Biology, not so much, right? If somebody gets me into microorganism stuff, doesn't fit well with me. Math, I've never had a problem with it. I've never had to really study for it. I've never had to develop that skill. I can pick it up very quickly. So I want to talk about this in terms of finding the talent, the things that you were good at, the things that just clicked as you were being shown them. Josh, it looks like you got something on your mind. What do you got?
Oh man, I'm bursting at the seams here. So, one, I think maybe we need to make the distinction between talent and exceptionalism. And so to be exceptional at something, then yes, you have to have the innate ability, and then you also have to have the influence, and you also have to have the drive, motivation, work ethic, and all of those things have to come together in order for someone to become truly exceptional at something, and exceptional in the way we in the world sees it, right? Not maybe as your grandma sees it, but like collectively recognized, like Mozart, GOAT, right? And I'm gonna buck up against what Travis said a little bit. I think everyone is talented. I think everyone does in fact have a talent. Now, is everyone exceptional, or are they going to be exceptional? Well, it depends on what we're talking about. I think everyone has their own talent that, like Chance was saying, we need to find. But I think that we being ourselves, like, exceptional. You can't be more Josh Tyler than me. I'm sorry, you can't. You can try. You're going to lose hands down. The question becomes, well, who is Josh Tyler, right? And that I have to figure out. And if I don't figure that out, then I'm not going to be very good at it. And that competition might be neck and neck if someone else is, gunning for the title. So I get what you're saying in that, yeah, not everyone is going to be amazing at everything, and people are going to be naturally predisposed to be better at other things than others. But I think for the individual, we each have our own talent, and we each have the ability to be exceptional if what we're trying to be exceptional at is ourself and reach our full potential.
Yeah, I'm digging
Sorry,
this.
Chance, to keep pushing your
Give her,
question
man.
off one more, but
Give her.
going back to what Travis was saying, a couple thoughts. So the idea, looking at the Wayne Gretzky, the Tiger Woods, the Venus sisters, or Venus and Serena, and saying, okay, we started them super early, they're working super hard, they have this amazing influence, work ethic, all these things, and that produced this exceptional level of ability. But my question is, how many people had that same experience that we've never heard of? Right? We only hear about the ones who got to that level. We don't hear about the ones who did all that stuff and didn't get there. And I'm not saying there are a lot of them by any means. There probably are not. But I would be willing to bet good money that there are plenty of people who had very similar tracks, largely because of their parents trying to make up for their failures as children, but who have had that same influence, and those kids have had that same opportunity, and those things did not produce the same results. Now you could argue, most likely scenario to me is that the kids absolutely didn't want it, right? It was not something they had any motivation to do. They were not interested in it. So it was all going through the motions. But you take someone like Andre Agassi, and after he retired, he was very honest about that. Said, I hated tennis. I hated every minute of it. It was something my dad basically made me do, but he still got there, right? He was still one of the greats in tennis, which I know nothing about, but that's what I'm told. But to Chance, to your point, regarding this natural proclivity, say, for math, I look at that too, and I wonder how much of that is influence and conditioning that we're unaware of because it happens at such an early age. So I look at myself, for example, my parents were total propeller heads, right? My mom had a graduate degree from Stanford. My dad had a master's from MIT and a PhD from Stanford, just super smart people. And I grew up with that influence. They were always reading to me. They were making me read. My dad was doing math problems on tablecloths at restaurants for me. And so is it something did I have an easy time in school because I have this innate ability to understand things more easily than other people? Or is it because I had that really strong influence as a very, very young child, literally from day one of being on the earth? Or is it both? I don't know. That's my question. But again, there's so many potential elements to this. I don't know if we're going to end up at a consensus here at the end of the day.
We never end up at a consensus. That's the whole point of the show. We want to be able to discuss it without really having answers. To answer your question, though, my mom is a hippie and my dad is a rancher. So no, there was no influence whatsoever in terms of math or development in that regard. I was reading early. That's a lot of that. We spent a lot of time reading. Most of it was because my parents were off doing stuff. We just were sitting around doing nothing anyway. So we would read. But there was no sort of development. I wasn't getting math help. When I did have a question or something like that, when I was doing my homework as a kid, nope. My parents were like, I don't know what to say, man. Sorry. Yeah, exactly. Good luck.
So I'm going to jump in because we're kind of at a junction point right now where we're kind of using your math as a foundation, Chance, which I think is being used incorrectly, or it's being used correctly for you if you're the only one on the planet, but it's not being used universally well, I don't think. And here's why. So there's two simple terms, the observer and the observed. And so we're all observers in our life. I'm the observer in this moment, whereas you guys are being observed by me. Now, the interesting thing about talent that I've found, and this is because of my coaching over the years, and I and I'm going to call out Greg as well as a great example of this, a better example perhaps than I am. I think that you can be the observer within your life, but then if you act in the capacity of being observed, if you are being observed, there is usually a finer focus on your outcomes or on what you're producing, or the sense that someone is evaluating you in your life, throughout your life, has a general tendency for people to pick up their pace or to try a bit harder or to really dig in. And so, Chance, I find it interesting that your hippie parents, you weren't observed. You were just the observer. And you believe that your real math comes to you really easy because it was freaking high school math. And, you know, when you went into the engineers, math came to you pretty easy because it was freaking simple math. It wasn't MIT math. I can assure you it's not the stuff that my boys are studying in engineering and pre-medicine right now, which is bonkers math. Like, I thought I was pretty good at math, but freaking high school math, man. And so there's the observer who believes that they're pretty good at math. It comes to me naturally. But as a person who's observed by an MIT professor, you don't know squat about math. And so that's where it comes to for me when it comes to talent. A person, the observer, can believe that they're freaking Einstein. But if I'm standing over in the corner observing them, now they are observed. I'm looking at them like they're the village idiot. And so it's contextual. If you think you've got talent, it's maybe because you've never been around talented people. And at the crux of it, I believe that people who come up in a system, a structured system, whether it's Olympic lifting or MMA or for Travis, if it's in the outdoor industry world, then you've got to learn through a process, being surrounded by a structure where you can contextualize yourself against, am I number 1? Am I number 12? Am I number 103 in this pecking order? You can't be a Ronin bumbling through the world, believing that you're talented without pressure testing it against the world. Now, I'll retract that. Maybe you can, but I don't think you'll get a very quick read on yourself. I don't think you'll understand yourself as the observer quite as fast unless you are in some sort of a contextualized, levelized silo where you understand, I don't suck as bad as them down there, but I suck because those people above me are kicking that ass. So if you can't contextualize, then you're the frickin' genius of the world. You're Mr. Talent. We're all Mr. Talent in our little bubbles. But the observer has to be observed. Greg, as a coach, would see someone coming in who might think that they've got the mega talent. But within about 12 seconds, he's going to know they're talentless in context of what is required to enter into the path that they want to enter into. So it's a very complex subject that can't be easily stated as, I was pretty good at math. It diminishes the complexity of the subject. You might have been good at math in high school, but that doesn't mean that you're good at math. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it's a great point. Greg, what do you got?
Let me just defend Chance here real quick and say, yeah, it was high school math, but he didn't pursue it beyond that.
Come on.
So maybe had he gotten into MIT off the ranch, maybe we would have found out that he truly was some innate math genius, but he decided to be a podcaster and stuff. So he was pursuing what he wanted to do, right? But Sean, you're getting right into the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? The less experience we have, the greater our evaluation of ourselves because we don't have that context, right? So I could be the best lifter in my gym. Well, guess what? Everyone in my gym is terrible, so I'm not that good. I get out there on the national stage, and suddenly I'm in the F session, and I'm sweeping up the end of the night, 11 p.m. No one's there watching me because no one cares. So there's certainly a lot of that going on. But then that made me think of going back to like what Josh was saying earlier is, do you have to be the best? And, is that even something that matters to you? So for example, I think we have to distinguish between misunderstanding, mischaracterizing, misrepresenting your ability, your knowledge, your experience, because you don't have that context and because you do truly believe you are something beyond what you are, from recognizing, yeah, I'm not the best. I don't know everything, but I am happy and content and fulfilled with this position. My current station in life is where I want to be. I think those are two really different things. And that's the social media influence, right? Is I am the best. I know everything. And it's like, you clearly have not gotten out much, because I can tell you right now, you don't know the first thing about what you're saying. But there's someone else out there just going about their life perfectly content, happy, saying like, yeah, man, I took math through 10th grade and I've been totally fine. I'm 55 years old. I've never needed anything beyond it. And so why would I pursue it any further? So I think those are two totally different things that you need to be aware of.
Absolutely. Great
I,
point. Josh, what do you got?
well, I think it begs the question, what harm does it do to us if someone has a false or incorrect view of the hierarchy that Sean is talking about? And I would submit that in most cases, it really doesn't matter. It doesn't affect me. Unless I am assembling a team, and when you tell me, hey, I can do this thing, and you actually can't, that's going to be a problem. So yeah, being dishonest with yourself or not having an accurate context could be a problem. If I'm picking my kickball team, I know my classmates fairly well. I know who can run, I know who can catch, right? But a new kid shows up and maybe he looks athletic. It's a gamble. And kickball is nowhere near as important as being in special forces, where you're assembling a team and like you for sure have to know what that person is capable of. So I think that pressure testing in that context, you can't get away from it. But I don't know that everything has to necessarily apply to that degree, like the math or what you can lift. I don't care how much any of you guys can lift. If you say that you can overhead snatch 500 pounds, then by golly, good for you, man. That's amazing. But if I'm picking a team to compete in the Olympics, I want to see it first. I'm not just going to take your word for it. And so I think that discernment is, Sean's correct in that, but we can let people live in their illusions if we want to on social media. Yeah, man, you're the toughest fighter who's ever lived. Sweet. Good for you. Tell everybody about it. Doesn't affect me. I can see that you're not. And so I don't have to be worried about it. Oh, what's he going to take business away from me? People are going to go train under him instead of coming to train under me. Good. They're going to learn real fast, and he's going to learn. Everybody learns. It's an amazing process. I think part of the issue, and this may run a little bit too deep, so forgive me, but this idea of the observer and observed, distinguishing that they're different. They're inextricably tied. They are one and the same. You cannot have an internal without an external, and vice versa. Like, the universe doesn't exist unless I'm in it, for me, right? And I don't exist without the universe. A box has an outside and an inside, right? You can't have a cube that doesn't have internal space and also an outer surface of it. It just doesn't exist that way. And so we tend to break things up into segments: outside, inside, observer, observation. But it's really just a way of processing things, because you can't just swallow a steak whole. You have to cut it up in small bites. So I think sometimes we mistake the bites for the actual thing, and being able to look at something in a much more global, holistic understanding that actually I can't say that my environment influences me. My environment is me, and I am my environment. There's no real difference. I just, to make sense of the world, I sequester myself as me, because it helps communicate things a little bit better.
This is a beautiful point. And yeah, go ahead, Greg. What do you got?
I was just saying, to go back to Josh, what you started about saying is like, why does it matter if someone doesn't have an accurate evaluation of themselves or is misrepresenting their abilities, experience, etc. And I would generally agree with you, but I would say it's becoming more and more problematic as we go with the greater and greater influence of social media and even, TV personalities and these things for a number of reasons. First and foremost, the people who are being duped by the people misrepresenting themselves are being duped because they don't have the experience, the understanding, the education, the knowledge to have the frame of reference to properly evaluate that person's ability, right? So, guy who just got hit the second stripe on his white belt yesterday goes and opens a BJJ studio. Well, the people who are going to go there don't know the difference, right? It's like, so they can go there, they can train there for 5 years, not get any better, be learning terrible things, developing terrible habits, but they don't know unless they step out of that place and go experience people who actually legitimately know what they're doing, know how to teach. Like, they have to have that frame of reference. And I think that's part of the problem, is that we're Dunning-Krugering ourselves to death out there, because it's not just the people, the presenters, who are saying, hey, this is what I've got and it's totally incorrect, but it's the people who are then seeing that who have no way of evaluating it. And there's always going to be a handful. Josh, you're out there, you can see the guy who opens the place down the street and go, guy's a clown, like no one should go to that guy. But Susie down the other end of the road has never ever even seen BJJ. She doesn't really even know what it is. She just heard it was good for self-defense or something, and she doesn't know. So it's like, there to some degree you can write it off and be like, whatever, it doesn't matter, let people do what they want to do. And that is my attitude with everything. Do what you want to do, except when it starts harming other people. And then I think people, the rest of us, have some duty to intervene for the sake of the good of other people. Now, of course, that's going down a whole nother road, but and we're, you and I are not going to solve the problem of terrible BJJ instructors by getting on Instagram and hammering every single one of them in the comments section. But I think you get what I'm saying.
It's a self-correcting problem. There's nothing to solve, because the people that are going to go to that person, if they can't discern the difference between a BJJ black belt and some Yahoo, then that's the lesson that they need. There's no other way to do it. I can't teach them. If I could, they would have come to me, right? And so, I think we need to, it seems maybe callous, but I think, the tough love, like, it will sort itself out. And we want to save people. We want to save people the hardship and the trouble, right? We want to save them and protect them from, bad actors or misaligned actors or dishonest actors. And I think the only way we can do that is just by shining our light. It is not trying to snuff theirs out. It's just being the beacon and allowing other people to see it to the best of our ability. Because as we go and start focusing on putting out all of these other lights, we can't be in two places at once. Our light diminishes. And you see this anytime you see someone get online and start shitting on someone else. I don't care how high and mighty they are, right? What integrity they're operating from. It brings them down 2 or 3 pegs whenever they get into the comments and start hammering on someone else for being inauthentic. It lowers them to that level. And I think the way to combat it is let the cream rise to the top. Let the truth shall set you free. And just shine brighter and be receptive for that person when they come in and they say, hey, so I was training Olympic weightlifting from a guy who doesn't know anything about anything, and I'm here to actually learn. Great. You are going to be so much better of a student because you'll appreciate now what good teaching is as compared to bad teaching. So there's pros and cons to it. I totally see your point. I'm looking at it through a bit more rose-colored glasses, I suppose.
So let me jump in here,
funny,
Greg. Let me before you jump in, I just want to make sure that we get the whole panel here. Travis, you got some thoughts on any of this? I saw you taking notes like mad. So what do you got?
Yeah, the hardest part is just keeping all the ADHD thoughts in mind here. I think I derive
my position of talent being something that is like luck. Not always, not in every single circumstance. There are rare cases when someone can have innate talent. But I still come back to thinking that, talent might not be as big of a thing as we want to ascribe to it. And I draw that conclusion just based on myself. I don't believe I have any particular talent in anything, really. I don't have any innate talent growing up. I've got size. I got size going for me. I can think somewhat straight, but not really that talented. What I have learned over the years, though, is tenacity in being able to overcome all of the challenges that have been presented to me. And I think the reason I am where I am right now is because of the challenges that I had. And I wouldn't change those for anything. When people look back and say, look at the difficulties that you've had to overcome, wouldn't it be great if you didn't have those? And I'd say no, because that is what's allowed me to become who I am today. So I think if talent is something that gives somebody an innate advantage in a particular area, couldn't it also be argued that just us living in North America, having access to clean running water, having an education system, a healthcare system, gives us untold advantages over other people in the world? And if that's the case, why aren't we all excelling and succeeding at the highest possible level with all of this talent or innate gifts that we've been provided? And I think more of it when we talk about observer and the observed. And Josh, I thought that was really interesting, the tangent that you took it down, kind of a fun place to talk about. And you also said, like, no one's going to be a better Josh Tyler than myself. And I'm still trying to figure it out. And I'll put it to you that you're never going to figure it out, because the Josh you are today is not going to be the Josh you are tomorrow. It's not the Josh you are yesterday. And in the observe situation, and looking at talent as a comparative thing, maybe a better position for us to look at would be, who am I today compared to who am I planning to be tomorrow and who I was yesterday? Maybe I can observe who I am and where I want to be and continually iterate and work at propelling myself forward. But to look at this scale of, you're talented, I'm not, you're at a high level of MMA, I don't compete high level MMA, I think that is a bit of a folly. And I still fall back on, I don't think ascribing somebody's accomplishments or abilities to talent is the right way to look at it.
But you just did it for yourself, whether you realize it or not. You identified your talent. Your talent is your tenacity. You got to where you are because you're tenacious. That is your innate talent. Okay, maybe you can't dribble a basketball above average. Maybe you can't dunk or do backflips or balance on a balance beam. But that tenacity, that character, that is essentially who you are, is your talent. And as far as the comparison of myself yesterday and myself tomorrow, none of those exist. The only me that exists is me right now. That is it. There's only me right now, and that's all that there ever can be. So by that regard, I can't be any better than what I am right now, because that is all that I am right now. It's obviously, we can project and we can think about the future and we can think about the past, but it doesn't mean that they're real. And so if we can get to a place of being in the now and just be constantly, consistently the best version of ourselves, then boom, you have it. Now, easier said than done. I don't profess to have that mastered by any stretch, but that is the ideology that I'm working towards. And it doesn't mean that I don't plan for the future. It doesn't mean that I, don't have, steps moving forward, because why would I plan for something when there's just the now? I still project in the future from time to time because it's useful, but I think we get caught up in it too much, projecting forward and backwards, and we miss out the moment to moment when you're the best that you could possibly be right now. You can't be any better than you are this second, and the next second, and the next second.
I'm loving this. Greg, what do you got?
Travis, correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I understood what you were saying is, you were not saying tenacity is an innate talent. You're saying that you developed tenacity because of an absence of other talents that would have allowed you to achieve these things more easily. In other words, so like, you're 6'6". Oh, I should be great at basketball. well, I'm terrible at basketball. So, but I really want to be a basketball player. So now I'm going to work twice as hard as the other 6'6" guys so I can become as good as I want to be. So that's tenacity. It's not talent. So is that what you were trying to get at? Because I would 100% agree with that.
That was what I was trying to get at, and it's a difficult distinction in there as well too. So yeah, 6'6" basketball. You should have seen me playing. I could catch all the rebounds and then shoot and miss. Catch a rebound, shoot and miss. I'm catching my own rebounds, right? People would say, "Wow, you're tall. You play basketball." I'm like, "Well, you're short. You play miniature golf." I mean, like, how does this relate, right? Yes, that was what I was getting at. Mind you, there's that whole nurture and nature sort of thing. I would argue that my brothers grew up in a similar environment and similar obstacles, and they did not thrive. So did I learn tenacity, which is what I would say? I'd say I learned tenacity through the hardships that I had. I would say I've suffered greater hardships than most other people that I know in my social circle. Did I learn tenacity through that, or was I tenacious, which causes me to push and drive, which will create a situation where I might have to continually push. So that is you are correct. That was what I was trying to say, but Josh's observation brings up an interesting question.
Well, so which came first, the chicken or the egg?
Mm-hmm.
Right, is what we're the fundamental philosophical paradox that we're running into here. Cause or effect, right? And again, this moment of now kind of concept, really the answer is yes, right? They are inextricably tied. They're two sides of the same coin. And so it really just depends on which side you want to flip over. It doesn't matter. They both exist simultaneously. Which one do you want to look at? Doesn't really matter. This is the joy of free will and being a conscious entity, is that we get to decide which one we want to believe in and which one we want to focus on and attribute to.
I'm digging this. Not the way I thought it was going to be, but loving this. Travis, what do you got?
Can I jump back really quick to address what Josh said a second ago? Well, two quick things. To be clear, when I was saying a duty to intervene, that's I'm not suggesting people go on the internet and bash the guy who doesn't deserve to be running a BJJ studio. Not by any means at all. Of course, I'm 100% with you. It's a bad look. It does you no favors, but that shouldn't even be the point. You should not really want to do that in the first place, right? Like, the goal is not to put other people down or hold them down. The goal is to help the people who are not being helped by that person. And to that end, then yes, your primary goal should be providing those people with the education, with the help, and providing that opportunity for them. But where I have to disagree with you, though, is the idea that this is a self-correcting problem. And I would say it's self-correcting, but with a great deal of potential collateral damage. And that's what I want to avoid. So even taking the BJJ example, so you have someone who goes to this other school. The guy doesn't know what he's doing. Well, day 3, he arm bars this poor lady, shreds her UCL. Now her elbow is unstable forever, right? So now she's probably not going to want to go do BJJ anymore. She's also probably going to be gun shy about any other new, potentially scary experience like that. So it does have very real, very damaging potential consequences. And that's my perspective, is that's what I would like to help people avoid. And I think so we can't get too cavalier with the let people do whatever they want. Yeah, you got to let people do whatever they want. But I do think it is, people have a responsibility to use their knowledge in a positive way to help people avoid those things. And that is not by going and standing in front of that guy's door and saying, no, don't go in here, he's an idiot. That's not what I'm intending to put across.
So how do you save that?
How do you have to find ways to help?
How do you save that lady?
That's the tricky
part,
analogy. Right? But what you're trying to do is, Chance, you're muted. I would love to hear what you're saying, which is stop.
Sorry,
probably.
I'm muted. That's my bad. I hit it twice. I just want to jump on this. That's what this is. That's what the collective is. What we're trying to do is help people by discussing these topics, because to both your points, I can't stand in front of every philosophical debate. I can't step in front of people and say, hey, man, you're not thinking about this clearly or correctly. But what I can do is provide an avenue for other people to discuss it, like the five of us. We can engage in this discussion. We can disagree with each other. We can agree with each other. We can debate these topics. We can come out of a 2-hour discussion and say, I don't know. But the beauty of it is that what we're providing is an arena, if you guys want to put it that way, to fight about it, for lack of a better term, is that we're putting it to the test. To Sean's point earlier when he was talking about the observed and the observer, we still need to test the skill set of whatever it is we're doing, whether it be a physical skill set or a philosophical skill set or a psychological skill set or a mathematical skill set. It still has to be put to the test. That's why we have theories, right? We put out a theory and say gravity works like this because I've tested it over and over and over and over again. But even with that, we haven't thought of all the different iterations that we can test it of, so I can't say this is a 100% fact. I can just say it's a theory. And I think to get kind of to the point of or not the point of what we're talking about, but to develop the point of talent, that's why I wanted to have this conversation. It's because everybody has a theory on it. And I'm just loving this so far.
Well,
Sean, sorry, go ahead, Josh. What do you got?
Well, I just wanted to say with Greg, I think you are currently doing the thing right now. Like I went through and looked over your stuff, and it's fantastic. The only thing you could do differently is just continue to do what you're doing and amplifying your voice, right? We can't go out and like Chance said, stand in front of every door of every knucklehead who has no business teaching people Olympic movements or BJJ or whatever firearms instruction, right? Like you can't. It's impossible because there'll always be a new idiot to come along and serve as the bad example. We need those actually as a juxtaposition. If everyone was an expert in the thing, well, one, you'd be out of a job, and two, we wouldn't have the contrast to know what wrong even looked like. And so, we could demonize these people, make them the bad guys, and I appreciate like your righteous indignation towards it, because I could feel like your heart by what you do. You want to help people. It's in the right place. So just keep helping people. And by virtue of doing that, that's where I say the problem will solve itself, because you will disciple more and more people in the way. The more people you can teach, the more others exist to spread the good news and, drown out the bad voices, right? Again, the cream rises to the top. So as long as we are preaching the good word, whatever that happens to be that we believe in, I have to believe that it will override whatever negative, detrimental things are happening. And that's just me. I have a, overly optimistic view of things, which is either a blessing or a curse.
No. 100%. So to answer your question that you asked is how do we save that lady? It's exactly what you said. But that was my point initially, is that to quote, let people do what they're going to do. That's a totally passive thing. That is you sitting there just allowing the world to go on as it is. That is very different from what you just said. What I'm doing, what we're doing, is actively creating content, going out and helping people, providing those opportunities for them to learn better, help themselves, all these things. So that was my objection, is between passively just sitting and observing and going, oh man, that sucks, that lady's never going to do this again, to, well, here's what I'm going to do, is to actually be someone who is contributing. And maybe that person will never know who I am and never see this stuff, but at least it's there for her to potentially find it, rather than, God, I can't stand these guys, they drive me nuts, I'm going to go move to a cabin in the woods and, just write poetry in the rain, or, whatever ever. And that's always an
Yeah,
option for me. It's in the background at any given time, but
yeah, no, and sorry, but for me saying people are going to do what they're going to do was not to sit passively by and do nothing. It's just I can't control other people's actions. All I can do is
no, of course not.
what
Yeah.
I can do, right? And so yeah, it wasn't just like, well, do nothing, don't keep your information to yourself, and if they want it, they'll come to you. No, put it out there, be a beacon, and then people will decide, hey, is this attractive, and do I follow this lighthouse, or do I crash into the shore? Like, you can't run out of the lighthouse and save every ship. All you can do is shine the light.
Right. Yeah.
Perhaps that is
may.
the thing. Yeah, Sean,
If
I was going to
I
come to you
may.
right there. Here you go.
Thank you. I'm going to try to change the subject. And I don't mean the topic, I mean the subject, in a way that will create some different discussion. So Josh had said earlier that, a cube has an inside and it has an outside, or it has an internal and it has an external. And now this is a rhetorical question. I don't expect an answer, but I expect some thought when I ask the question. The rhetorical question is this: which part of the cube are you in? Are you in it or are you out it? Are you in the external world or are you the internal world? As a cube, where are you? I would like to propose this, that you are the line of the cube. You're not inside the cube. You're not outside of the cube. You're the actual structure of the cube, the line, we'll call it, in a line drawing. You operate between both spaces simultaneously, we'll call it. And so I think in our lives, on any given second, we have to decide, are we internal or are we external? Now, that's a gross oversimplification, of course. The reason I had to do that is because the cube as a thought construct is kind of interesting. How small or how big is your cube? If you've got a tiny little cube with your tiny little misunderstood talent, that is an entirely different conversation than if you've got a massive cube where you've really pressure tested your talent to better understand what it is. Finally, to my point, Travis, you'd said earlier that, a 24-hour solo world champion, and, but have I done a 48-hour solo? Yes, I've done a 48-hour solo, the first one in the world, because I was trying to expand my cube. As it turns out, I placed second against a freaking insane racer. And did I do a 72-hour solo race? No, because it didn't exist. And if it would have existed, I would have done it. And so that's super important to my thought construct that I'm creating right now for this conversation. Is, I'd said earlier, curiosity and passion will take you down the road. Your inherent talents, your innate talents that you're born with, they are what they are. And maybe you'll never know what they are unless you try to find them. But whatever you've got, skill will take you further down the road. Skill added to talent. So if you've got a small cube versus a large cube, those are two very different lives and two very different understandings of what talent is. I am in the business of making my cube as big as I can. Maybe that's a talent in and of itself, is the understanding that my talent is to keep pushing my cube bigger. So just a thought construct to throw out there and maybe change the conversation up a bit.
Well, I just want to say that my cube is average. Thank you very much. You need to get into the size of cubes. But no, I appreciate what you're saying there,
no
Sean.
need to talk about cube size.
I appreciate what you're saying, though. And to that point, I think you're absolutely correct in at least understanding the concept of the talent, right? Is that I think it needs to be, at least in my mind, I think we need to seek out what that talent is. And for you, perhaps it is to better expand your understanding of your own universe. That could be your talent. And my talent could be creating positions to allow information to flow to one another. Because that's one of the things that I've always seem to be able to do. Greg might be the same thing, might be that beacon, the light that's shining on the coast to tell everybody, hey, avoid these things, do these things, right? This is the way to go. And I'm digging this conversation. We're kind of going all over the place, but I like the fact that we always bring it back to single pieces.
So the book, The Talent Code, I haven't read it, but I do understand the general overview. And so I do believe that in the Talent Code, there's the discussion of X amount of thousands of hours required to become whatever you're going to become. And I think that that's kind of a misdirection, because talent is in you. You don't need 10,000 hours to become talented. You're already talented. Your talents are your talents. But you've got to maybe apply 10,000 hours of skill against your talents to understand your talent code, your results, your outcomes. And so I do think that talent is always going to be unknown and undiscovered and unhelpful unless you have enough curiosity to freaking understand how big your box can get.
I like it.
Yeah,
Greg, what are you thinking?
And the thing is if we're working with the accepted conventional definition of the word talent, it is innate, right? That's what it is. Talent is the thing you inherently have, has nothing to do with practice, skill, experience, anything. But going back to the cube idea here, 100%. And I think it's interesting, the idea of existing on the line between external and internal, right? On that threshold. And I think that we could maybe consider that as the default position. And we're going to kind of, switch in and out here and there depending on the circumstances. But also, I think depending on to some extent our kind of natural constitution, but also our influences. And I think one of the problems we run into with people these days so much is that they are spending way too much of their time on the external. They are observing themselves from outside, and they are making decisions about what to say, how to behave, what to do, who to be, based on what they believe others' perceptions of them are, right? And I don't mean to get too corny about it, but that's, I think, the source of so many people's discontent, is that they are constantly pursuing other people's goals for them, and those things often might not even be correct, right? They're kind of our imagined other people's perceptions of ourselves. Whereas if we could, consciously, intentionally spend more of our time and effort on the internal, focusing on, what is meaningful to us, what is important to us, what our absolutely underlying core values are. I sound like I'm giving a business seminar now when I say core values, but you're with me, right? Because that is ultimately what should be, that is what determines our motivations in the true sense of the word. But those are the things that should be dictating what and how we are doing in order to achieve a sense of fulfillment and contentment. And that's why we end up in this like really horrible, miserable cycle of keeping up with the Joneses, or now it's the Kardashians, of course, but this constant external influence of what should I be doing in order to make a bunch of people I will never know and who have absolutely no significance in my life, what would I need to do to make them like me more? And it has absolutely nothing to do with what makes you happy and what makes you fulfilled. And I think it's a really common mistake. And the more time we can spend on the inside of that line versus the outside, the better off we are. Not to say that we should abandon the outside.
Yeah. And so if you don't mind, Greg, because I kind of like the idea of operating as the line on the cube, or being the line within the cube, out of the cube, your et cetera cube. So I'm just going to show this. Now, granted, I'm not much of an artist, but there's a cube. One is a super thin line, and of course the other cube is a super thick line. So if we are the line, if we ourselves are the actual cube, we have an internal space and an external space. The big difference between these two cubes This cube right here is kind of an expert. They've figured out what their talents are. They've figured out their innate abilities. They've applied a whole bunch of skill against the problem. And now they're a super thin line. That's themselves, is a super thin line that can move back and forth rapidly between their internal and external space. Now, this line is super, super thick, way thicker than I could draw, because I'd be drawing another hour just scribbly-do, making a super thick line. Imagine each line is a mile wide. The cube is a mile-wide line to create that three-dimensional space. Now you're on a mile-wide line that in order to understand your internal space, you've got to walk a frickin' mile to get there to understand your internal space. And then it's like, okay, now I'm going to go look at the external world. Now you got to walk a frickin' mile. It's taking you ages to move back and forth between your internal and external space. Over time, that line gets thinner and thinner and thinner and thinner until you're on a super thin line and you can see your internal and external space simultaneously. All of that takes time. When you're starting out trying to understand your talent, your innate abilities, you're starting out on the mile-wide line. But over time, you'll be on a super thin line. Just a thought to throw out there.
Interesting. Josh, what do you got?
But can I?
Yeah, sorry,
can I say
my
that if,
battery died. I just so I missed quite a bit of that, but I think I got the gist of where you were going. Did we discuss or just is there any reason why we can't eliminate that line altogether?
There is no spoon.
There is no spoon.
We didn't get there though, but by all means.
Well, I mean, when we talk about, the quantum field and physics and superposition, right, where something can be in two places at once, we talk about the way the brain works as a quantum computer, is the best analogy that we've been able to come up with for it. We still don't really understand, but this idea, this duality of being in two places at once, because it's realizing it's all the same. There's never anywhere you cannot be by that logic. And again, we parse things as humans in this form, moment to moment, bit by bit. But that doesn't mean that is the totality of what reality is, what existence is. That is just, so far as our consciousness has been able to process. But what if we could expand that further, right? Could we get to a certain point where there is no line, there is no distinguishable difference between the external and internal world? You're just a part of all of it. And it's all, and you see that it's all connected, that you are not separate from someone else or some other thing. There are no things, there just is. And I know, again, that's way the hell out there, but I think it's an interesting destination or mind experiment to try and play with, because I think it opens a lot of doors for our own capabilities, what we can do with our talents, and how we can really have this experience that we call life.
It is a good thought, and I'm down with it. That's kind of how I think. But I didn't think like that when I was 6 years old, when I was 12 years old. When I was 12 years old, my line was the bottom one, super thick, trying to understand what even internal and external meant. Now at 61, my line is thinner because I've given it a whole boatload of thought, a whole boatload of life. And so I'm with you now, Josh. I'm at a point in my life, and have been for a while, that I think very similar to what you just said. But I didn't think that way when I had a hand grenade in my hand. I didn't think that way when I had a soccer ball on my foot. All through my life, all the phases of my life have been opportunities for me to understand the things that we're talking about right now. But I wasn't born with this understanding. I was born with innate talent. And so it takes time to understand all of these things, and they'll never be understood unless these kind of conversations happen. And then once a conversation has happened, I'll do a whole bunch of thinking about it while I'm riding my bike this afternoon. And so nothing comes easy, nothing comes free. The line doesn't exist, or the line is you. It's all a matter of thought, I suppose.
Yeah. Greg, what do you think? What were you going to say?
Well, yeah, it's funny that Travis said there is no spoon, because I've had that in the back of my mind for the past 45 minutes, like just looking for the perfect time to drop it in. And yeah, Josh, basically, I think you're just describing enlightenment, right? And it fits actually perfectly with Sean. Is he starts with this wide line. As he gains experience, intelligence, knowledge, wisdom, all these things, that line gets smaller. And then eventually that line disappears. You reach enlightenment and you die. But in all seriousness, going back to the cube size thing, right? And the idea of exploring things to find your talent, it's experience, right? You have to have life experience. You cannot become more familiar with the internal, and you cannot start erasing the line between internal and external without experience, without the intentional, deliberate, introspection, consideration of those experiences. And I think in the same way, that's how you do discover what talents you have, because you can't figure out your talents sitting on the couch with the dogs, right? Like you have to get out there and try things that you have not done before. You have to have those challenging experiences. You have to have those humiliating experiences. You have to have those successes. All these different things, because every single one of those things teaches you something different. If you're paying attention, you're choosing to use them that way. And so in that same way that you find your talent, at the same time, you are developing the ability to apply it much more effectively to whatever you choose to do. And you are, progressively making your way toward that zero line enlightenment situation.
And Greg, I think the problem that we run into, what prevents people from pursuing that, is that we live in a culture where failure is a 4-letter word, right? It is a sin to miss the mark. You cannot fuck up.
Right.
Do not make a mistake, ever, right? And this is the culture that we have been born into, and this is what we teach kids when they're young. We grade them, and we give them a ranking based off of how many they got right and how many they got wrong, instead of encouraging them to explore and to learn and to find their talents. And hey, part of that is you're going to screw it up. You have to. You cannot get it right. It is impossible, because if you got it all right, there would be nothing to do. If the whole world was all white or all black, there would be no contrast. You couldn't make out any shape, form of anything. So there has to be the juxtaposition. But we don't encourage people to try things and fail, right? We don't encourage them to find or develop their talent, because unless you're super good at something, you better not do it, because you're going to get ridiculed, you're going to get pointed at, you're going to get singled out. And so we shrink back in our little tiny box. We shrink down into the cube, and we never want to leave it. We don't explore, we don't look around on the inside, and we don't go outside because there's bad things there. And I think that that's the misstep that I think, people who have gotten experience and wisdom, it's really important that we relay that message of like, no, go screw it up. Here's a piece of PVC pipe. Play around with this thing. You can't hurt yourself. And then when you get a sense of it, then we'll talk about where the bar needs to be. Then we'll talk about how not to rack your nuts when you come up, when you're, you know what I mean? We can sort these things out, but we're so afraid of failure. We don't want to let people make mistakes. We certainly don't want to make them ourselves. And it's not that they're great, but they are necessary. They're part of the process, and we can't sidestep them.
So I just want to jump in on this.
Avoid failure is not try anything hard, right?
Absolutely. And I got this image in my head that I want to play with you guys on this. And first off, I just want to say, Josh, we're going to watch the language. Just be careful with that.
Oh, sorry. My bad.
All good.
He's a savage, but he's also a gentleman.
Also a gentleman. We got to do both sides of it, right? The question I have for you guys: do you guys know what the Battle of Alesia is? It was between Julius Caesar and Vercingetorix, the last battle between the Gauls, and so it's just interesting because it plays off of the image of the box that we're talking about. So the siege was it was a siege from the Romans sieging a Gallic town called Alesia. And Vercingetorix, who was a Gaul leader that was leading this rebellion against the Romans, was trapped inside the city. So the Romans came and they built a fortification around the city and started a siege. But before they could do that, runners got out and they sent out for reinforcements to try and come and break the siege. And instead of leaving, Caesar decided, I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to build another wall. And so he built a separate fortification on the other side of his fortification, and he created a dual fortification where the Romans were on the inside and Gallic forces were on either point. And to Josh's point, what he just said was, we build up these walls as children, as our influences are kind of coming from both sides. We have this internal structure of innate ability of, I want to explore that and I want to do these things, because when you leave kids alone to do their own thing, they naturally explore. They just go and do things when they're bored. And there's kind of a battle between the internal and the external. The external says, no, stay inside this box. We have to keep this thing going. You have to go to school. You have to do these things. These are the parts of our society that we have developed and we want you to attain. But I've had this image in my head kind of going back and forth of being hit from both sides. And if we are that line, when we spend a lot of time building up these defenses, there's nowhere to go. You just get sandwiched in between what my internal self wants and my external world is telling me. And then we have to sit there. We have to wait there unless we can either break out or develop ourselves to a point. Unfortunately, in the actual story of the battle, the Romans just starved out the internal and then they attacked the external. So that's not quite what we want to do in life. But I think it's a really good allegory to, our own innate talents. A lot of times we block them because we are the barrier from getting out, when really we should be just allowing things to kind of flow outwards, while at the same time kind of protecting ourselves from the external world, because we don't want all the influence from the external world. That's just right off the top of my head. Trav, I see you taking notes like mad. What do you got?
Oh, a whole bunch of stuff here. Interesting where we're going. And Greg, yeah, I don't doubt you had there is no spoon in your head for a while. I had it written down for a while. It's funny watching how a conversation on talent can evolve into something like this. Chance, I had no idea that you were a talented historian, and Sean, what a talented artist. Those boxes, I tell you, pretty cool. And I knew I should have picked a larger metric than 48 hours in order to try and emphasize my point. Good on you. We talked about quantum entanglement. It brings up an interesting thought. I'm not sold. I mean, it's a theory. Either it's quantum entanglement, quantum superposition. One thing spins one way, the other thing spins, or they're affected no matter how far away they are. Or is it our perspective on what we're trying to look at? And I apply that to talent. Again, is it our perspective of what we're looking at in talent? It'd be akin to a fish in a square aquarium and a camera pointed at the fish from the front panel and a monitor in the front, and the fish can look and it can see its face as it looks in the monitor because the camera's right on them. And then you put another monitor right beside the fish, and the fish turns over here and says, well, this one, it shows me my side, but it seems to move whenever I move. The fish is looking at the exact same thing. It's just perspective that the fish is looking at it. Maybe our perspective on superposition or quantum entanglement is just one that we're having a hard time wrapping our head around, but it's actually got a really simple explanation to it. Maybe, I don't know, maybe that also applies to talent. Maybe there's a real simple explanation for talent. We look at the size of the box that we have for talent. Again, it's all perspective. There is no box, there is no spoon. I like, Sean, you say, what did you say? Nothing is easy. Nothing is free. Well, I think the one thing that I'm hearing in the conversation, and it might be confirmation bias, but it seems to keep going back to my thoughts that I don't really ascribe to the idea of talent. Nothing in my life that's worthwhile has ever come easy. Anything worthwhile, the easy stuff that comes, it's just not worthwhile for me. Everything that's been worthwhile, I've had to work my rear end off for. There you go, Sean. I watch the language. Or sorry, Chance, I watch the language. And about failure. And I think that's a really important thing that was brought up, Josh. I think you were talking about, and Greg, you're saying too, that failure is something that we shouldn't be afraid of. And talent is, I look at it in a similar way. E.H. Chapin would say, out of suffering have emerged the strongest souls. The most massive characters are seared with scars. Now, are they massive because they're talented? Was their talent that they could overcome these things? Or was it the fact that they had a system in place and an iterative process to continually explore their boundaries and push further in a way that they had that feedback and they could grow?
Asking big questions. Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, I mean, I got a million things coming to mind based on every single piece that Travis just said. So thanks for nothing, buddy. So I'll stick with the last one because that is a really interesting idea. And you obviously read a lot of books. You're spitting quotes out here. It's impressive. But Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, for example, describing arguably one of the most horrific experiences any human has ever had, and noting the extremely broad array of responses the people involved had to it, right? Some immediately gave up, died. And then you have someone like Viktor Frankl who was he took the totally different route, and he was doing things like breaking off a little piece of his own bread to give to somebody else, despite the fact that he was starving. He lost his entire book manuscript when he was taken, and he rewrote the whole thing. And so, but the question is, why? Why did each of those people respond so differently to that exact same situation? And so then it does beg the question, how much of that was innate and how much of it was, conditioning from their previous experiences? And then how much of that was based on their choices, based on innate things to, how they responded to those experiences? It just goes on and on and on forever. And I don't know. It's one of those things where you can't find the answer because you can't replicate those circumstances with controls and the perfect set of subjects and actually have repeatable, measurable research with it, right? So it always comes back to these philosophical arguments, and not to say that they're not useful by any means, but to go back real quick to what Josh was saying, and now I'm going to blank on it here, but the failure part. It's a really interesting phenomenon and incredibly disheartening that we do have that kind of response to failure. And I think the craziest part of it is that we are far more afraid of humiliation and ridicule as a result of failure than we are of serious physical consequences, like disfigurement and death. You look at Travis, you're an outdoors guy. How many people have gotten lost and gotten themselves into horrible trouble because they refused to do the thing they needed to do because they were terrified of being ridiculed for getting into that position in the first place? And so, it's the classic guy will drive around for 48 hours straight being lost and will not ask for directions because it's embarrassing. Or you go on the Home Depot app to find where the thing is on what aisle because you don't want to ask the guy in the apron. So it's such a curious thing that we're so willing to subject ourselves to like these horrible situations physically and emotionally and mentally, but not that one, right? That's the one that terrifies us. And going back to what you're saying about, kids coming up, being ranked, everything is a competition, everything is a value judgment. And the Sean Chance, one of you was saying, when you're a little kid, you get bored, you get curious, you go and explore and you try things. And yeah, you scrape your knee, you fall out of the tree and break your arm, all these things, you're willing to do that. But then over time, it's that conditioning where we kind of just get bombarded with the negative comments and all these things that make us fear all the things we used to want to do. So the goal needs to be expanding that cube, moving that line or your position relative to that line, I think more to the internal, or at least learning how to blur that line to the extent that you are far more concerned with what is happening internally and how that affects you in a positive way versus your concern with how what you're doing is going to be perceived by other people.
I think
Thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
Yeah, I
Can-
think
can I-
you mentioned there about Frankel. Now, he relied heavily on Nietzsche when he was going through there. A man who has a why to live can suffer almost anyhow. And that's one of the things
Right.
that I look at in myself and I bring up with others as well. Like, why are you doing it? And what's your why? Because I think that's a very important piece of the puzzle. If we look at talent, perhaps ascribing things to talent can diminish the why for an individual. I'm a good artist. Well, why do you want to do it? Well, because I love to draw. Okay, well, let's work on the love of it and the process that you would like to see to get into place. What you're saying as well, his famous quote, "The one thing you can't take from me is the way I choose to respond to what you do to me. The last of life's great freedoms is one's ability to choose their attitude in any given circumstance." Again, that comes down to a very internal, how you choose how you're going to accept these atrocities that are happening to you, or how you choose you're going to accept the world that happens to you, ends up being your reality. Is that a talent to be able to do that, or is that a conscious choice that you work on?
Have you read Seligman's research on learned helplessness?
No, I've read on learned helplessness, but not Seligman's.
He's the guy who I originally came up with the idea, as far as I know.
Mm.
But that is what he was studying: is can you condition someone to essentially give up as the first option, right?
You can.
And so that is an interesting thing, right? Is how many of people were taught, not intentionally, obviously. No one is intentionally teaching their children to just quit and give up when things get hard. I would hope. I don't know. But in some way or another, certain people do learn that whatever they do, whatever their attitude is, it doesn't matter. So why should I bother? Whereas other people have the opposite experience, where they learn early on, hey, I'm in a horrible situation, but I can decide how I'm going to look at it, and therefore how I'm going to respond. And therefore I will have some effect, no matter how minuscule, but I will have some effect on the outcome, and I will have some control over my own destiny. And that makes all the difference in the world to them. Right. And so, yeah, but again, how do we answer that? We can't do longitudinal studies on these people for 85 years from day zero of life and see where everything went wrong or how it went right.
So,
But as a casual observation, we can make some general conclusions by looking at people throughout our lives, closely observing them. And so, Travis, you talked about artist, someone who's a good artist from a young age. Isn't it funny, or I believe it's funny anyway, how talent can create fragility? And so talent can be a big problem. So that natural artist at the age of 6, now their work is hanging in the living room, and then at the age of 8, now it's hanging in the elementary school, and at the age of 12, now it's in the high school, and at the age of 18, now it's hanging wherever. And so all along the way, their natural talent as an artist has provided some degree of success naturally, almost effortlessly. But at some point, perhaps when they're an adult, and perhaps when they're in the industry of art, where they have to deliver, where there's pressures that they didn't have to learn how to manage when they were a kid, because it all came so effortlessly. At some point in life, if things come easy, eventually there'll be a correction, and it's called it'll get hard. And if you didn't learn how to move through those moments when you were younger, because talent allowed you to effortlessly move through without any adversity, Well, presto changeo, when you're an adult, things will eventually change. And then you won't have the skills to manage the moment as an adult that you could have learned when you were a talented kid. It's an interesting thought. What do you guys think?
Let's go to Josh first. What do you got?
Yeah, sorry. Well, I wanted to weave a thread and tie a couple of things together if I can attempt here. You were asking about the quantum situation, and is it an observation in perspective issue? And to my understanding, you look at the double slit experiment, right, where we talk about, does energy move in waves or particles, right? And the way that experiment is explained is that, well, the observer affects it, right? If it is not measured, they will move as a wave. But if you measure it, they will break down into particles, right? And what I think the key to that is less about the observation and it's more about the measurement. We can observe things and not necessarily change their state. It is only when we try to quantify them in some way that now we have imposed something external onto it that affects the system. And I think we do that with ourselves when we try to rank ourselves and give this hierarchy and this structure. Then we affect the outcome, right? Whereas I can just be going along doing my thing for the joy of it because I like training jujitsu, and then now all of a sudden I have externally imposed, well, how good am I at it relative to someone else? And I go and compete, and maybe I don't do as well as I thought I did based off of some expectation that I had concocted, which again is just my own mind deciding, hey, I should be good at this because I've been doing it. There's no reason to believe I should be exceptional at this thing. I just do it because it's fun. I like rolling with people, right? And I like learning this thing because I'm curious. And then I do a competition, I get my ass handed to me. All of a sudden, I don't like this anymore because the measurement does not meet my expectation. And maybe I don't do it again, right? It got hard. Well, I'm learning something, right? Okay. I'm not as good as I expected. Well, why did I have the expectation? I don't know. Going back to the art situation, the person learning the hard way, right? If there was no difficulty, right, in the early phases, then you may not be equipped later on when you encounter it. I don't know that that's necessarily a bad thing. Like, you get to the difficulty when you get to it, and we can self-impose it if we want to. What's that?
I said it was bad for Mozart.
Maybe, but that's our projection. We projected it was bad. We look at what happened to Mozart and we're like, oh man, that sucks. But we're not Mozart. We don't know what he was thinking. We don't know his experience. We can only project onto that what we think and feel. But for him, man, that could have been awesome. That could have been the best possible thing that could have ever happened. We don't know. Right? It's only when we try to quantify things that we start to place judgment and decide whether they're good or bad. And I'm not saying that's wrong in of itself.
Yeah, but what we do know is we didn't get an extra 10 years of Mozart. Because as Travis said, I would like, as a student of Mozart, since I started playing piano at 8 years old, I love Mozart, man. If someone lined up in front of me right now and said, would you like an extra 10 years of Mozart? There'd only be one answer, and it'd be yes. And so I'm not discrediting what you're saying, Josh, about, well, it's Mozart's life to live and he gets to do what he gets to do. That's cool. But give me another 10 years of Mozart and I'm going to take it every single time. And so the crux of my point is, we all have our own little decisions that we get to decide, but ultimately we do live in an external world, and that external world, if we could provide more to it, I'd like to provide more rather than less. And my talents, whatever innate talents I've got, if I can expand my cube and provide more for the world, I'm always going to choose that. I'm always going to provide more rather than less. And I think that Mozart, if he could have provided more, he would have. And why didn't he? How come he didn't? Now, this is an inference, of course, but as Trav said, as he was raised, perhaps he wasn't raised in a way that gave him structure, so that he wasn't drinking quite as much, so that he wasn't as cavalier in his life as he was, so that ... But I don't know, because I wasn't there. But I am inferring that things could have been done better. The world could have had more. And I think that is kind of a crux of this conversation.
I think so, but I'll counter that and just play devil's advocate. What if his process, the lack of structure, whatever he didn't have, was what allowed him to do what it was he did? And if you impose something different, now all of a sudden he's just some regular schmuck who doesn't do anything musically, right? I would argue that what he gave us all he had, because if he could have given more, he would have, right? But the fact, by virtue of not having more Mozart, it means that's all we got. He did as much as he can, to the point where you, Sean, are doing as much as you can in this moment. You can't do anymore. You're full to the brim. And the next moment you'll be full to the brim. And the moment after that, you'll be full to the brim. Now, by virtue of you and your character and who you are, we can look back and we can comparatively say, well, that was more than before, but you can't give any more than you already are. You're already as much Sean as you could possibly be. And I think sometimes this idea, this never ending pursuit of more, right? Where the natural logical progression is we just need more. Why? And this isn't settling for mediocrity, but I think it is important to question, how much is enough? How much Sean do we need? I think we have enough, because you're awesome, right? Like, this, so you continue to just be Sean, which is you train and you improve things and you make the world a better place by you being in it. But I think this trying to tap into something that isn't already there is a trap that we can fall in, that leads us to heartache and being discontent and never satisfied, because, well, I'm not enough. I could be more. I could be more. When does it end? When you're dead? And then what? Now there's no more Sean. I wish we could have had 10 more years of Sean, right? Someone will be saying, I wish he had,
There'd be
not
others
run
that
so many
say
races.
10 years less.
I was going to say the same thing.
Well, but this brings up a really...
Go ahead, Greg.
Oh, sorry, Josh. But Josh was saying this, I think, really early on, is this idea that does having a particular talent obligate you to use it for other people's benefit. So yeah, Mozart was a phenomenally talented a musician, but does that mean he has to produce music for our enjoyment? Did he owe us 10 more years? And I think Josh is right on, where it's like, maybe he didn't have 10 more years. Maybe he didn't have one more day in him. And that's a Mozart issue. That's his business. And the other thing is, if he did feel a sense of obligation, like, oh man, I gotta get my act together, quit drinking, learn how to manage money. I gotta pump out, a bunch more music for 10 more years to make Sean happy. Well, you know what? That next 10 years of his making music, he's going to be miserable. The product is going to suffer. It's not going to be the same Mozart, because he's no longer doing it for the right reasons. And therefore, it's not going to produce the same result. So I'm with Josh in the sense that, yes, you have this talent. Yes, it can create contributions to the world that other people benefit from and love and appreciate. But that doesn't mean you're obligated to continue providing those things simply for those other people, right? I think a lot of us do have that sense that we do want to provide things and contribute, and often we go beyond what we should be doing, and we push ourselves to a point where we're no longer happy, we're no longer fulfilled. We're doing it out of a sense of obligation or duty, which is a problem, like Josh was saying. And so I think that it's key to look at talent as something that is ultimately for you, right? This is something that is available for you to exploit to your benefit, for your enjoyment, for your pursuit of contentment and fulfillment. And it's awesome if that is going to help other people and contribute something of value to their lives. But if you change the way you're approaching it and you start to pursue what's important to them instead of what's important to you, you're not going to do the thing that they were appreciating in the first place anyway. So it's hurting you. It's not helping them anymore. So I think that's always got to be kept in mind for everybody, regardless of what they're doing.
I'd like to add something else.
I'm totally good with that. I really am totally good with that, boys. Honestly, I have no disagreements. And I'm sad that my Mozart pot stir didn't work at all. But the guy's got to try.
I just want to add this in here because it's an interesting point of this. And then I think we're going to have to do some final thoughts here. But a lot of great talents, a lot of great artists, musicians, all kinds of things were never recognized in their times. So I'm thinking like Da Vinci wasn't the super famous painter until after he had died. Van Gogh, same thing. I'm thinking Jimi Hendrix. I'm like, these people were highly skilled, highly talented people, but it was through their deaths that they became famous. I can't say through their deaths, but after their deaths, their works became that much elevated, right? So the fact that, Sean, you want 10 more years of Mozart, great. But those 10 years, like was said, could be crap. He could be churning out garbage, right? You don't know that the ability and the talent wasn't used to its fruition, to all of its capability, because those later years could have just been extra, right? They may not have been outstanding works of art at that point. They could have just been standard, Oscar Mayer Wiener songs, like jingles and stuff. Who knows? So I can't thank you guys enough. This has just been an absolutely incredible conversation. And I want to point out a quick comment here. Seb jumped in here a little while ago. He said, to Greg's excellent point, the fear of embarrassment sometimes supersedes death. Think choking in a restaurant or running to the bathroom or suicide in some instances. It's a great point. I remember in every first aid course I've ever taken was like, most of the time people die of heart attacks. They end up dead in the bathroom because they get this feeling and they leave. They're like, oh man, I don't want to be a burden at this point. And they will wander off. They'll remove themselves from the group and then they die alone. So embarrassment can absolutely do this. And then Seb jumps in here and says, incredible convoy, boys. Good to see you, Seb. And let's get some final thoughts. Talent, superposition, philosophy, music, whatever else we've talked about, we've hit quite a bit. Lisa jumped in here and said, great live podcast. Let's start with you, Trav. Anything still burning in the back of your brain?
Not much. I mean, further to Sean's point about talent being viewed as a demotivator in certain instances, I would agree with that. I've always held that the concept and idea of I'm talented, it can be a demotivator in other people. It's like everybody wants to achieve more, I would say. Most people would like to achieve more. They want to earn more. They want to do more. An interesting study was done on managing talented, creative people, where they found that once a pressure was applied, the more money they provided them, the less talented and less creative these individuals would become. Up to a certain level, yes, money was important, but you start going past a certain level, time and again, they found that it increased the pressure and the talent and creativity declined. Why is that? I don't know. Maybe they didn't have those pressures before and it came easy. Maybe. I don't know. But the big part of all of that, I think, both Greg and Josh, and I guess we all were kind of talking about, was the idea of how much is enough. And I think that's something that people should really explore. And I look at it like cliff jumping. Hey, I'd like to jump off a cliff into the water. That was fun. Kind of got the heart going. Let's go higher. Well, let's go higher again. Like, at what point do we stop? Like, how much is enough? And there is that famous one where a reporter asked Rockefeller, it's like, you got so much money. How much more do you need? And he says, just $1 more. That was his response. So maybe my final thought would be for the listener, the viewer, how much is enough?
That's a great thought. It made me think of the skydiver that jumped out without a parachute to land in that giant safety net.
That's pretty awesome.
That's pretty awesome. But like, where do you go from there? Greg, what's your final thoughts?
I don't have anything as succinct as Travis there, but I would say that this opened up so many avenues that I didn't expect. And I think that, like pretty much everything else, it always comes back at some point to the fact that we as individuals need to invest the time and the effort and have the willingness to figure out who we are, what matters to us, why. Because that is going to inform or should inform all of our decisions, behaviors, choices, and the trajectory of our lives. And it's the failure to do those things that get us, just spinning our wheels, going in circles, whatever analogy you prefer, and not ever reaching a point where we feel not an end point, but a point where we feel like, hey, we're finally on the path that is you know providing this life experience that we want to have. It's always this, the next thing I do, the next cliff is going to be the one that finally makes me happy, or whatever the case is, rather than recognizing I don't even want to jump off cliffs anymore. Maybe I should take a step back and actually figure out what is meaningful to me so that I can then make, appropriate decisions.
Bam. I love it. Josh, you got any final thoughts?
Yeah, I do. I wanted to just I had forgotten there was the topic of fear of failure, right? And really what we're actually talking about is not failure. It's a fear of loss. We're afraid of being cast out, right? Of losing our identity or our place, our status, belonging to the group. And I wrote something to a buddy of mine that I'll share with you guys. On that subject, it's amazing how powerful.
I think we lost him. It is
Right.
amazing how
That was
powerful.
powerful, though.
Very,
That
very,
was.
that was powerful. Yeah, exactly. Sean, there he is. He's back. Hold on.
Oh, I can't.
We lost you
can't.
there for a second, Josh. Do you want to restart?
It's
Yeah,
amazing
sorry,
how powerful.
It's amazing how powerful our fear of rejection is, right? In that we will let ourselves burn to the ground before we ask for a glass of water, right? And this goes back to what we're talking about, like asking for help, right? As men, we don't want to burden anyone with ourselves, and we because we might be rejected. They might tell us no. Oh, God forbid I mess up this thing and I get kicked out, because for much of our existence that's meant death, right? Exile from the tribe means that you die, because we cannot survive alone. And so it's been ingrained in us that we have to belong, and we'll do anything to belong, even die in order to belong. We will allow ourselves to perish, right? And that fear often drives us and prevents us from asking for the help that we need, right? And so, there was a lot more that I wrote about that, but that was really the gist of it. And so I think it's just important that we recognize that by virtue of our existence, it means we are meant to be here, right? You belong because you are here. If you didn't belong, if you weren't supposed to be here, then you wouldn't be. So again, the internal and external environment are the same. It has created you and you were creating it. And so you were supposed to be here until the time which you were not. And so, ask for the help that you need. Don't walk in fear of rejection, because you can't be rejected. Because you're a part of all of the things. You belong. So, raise your hand if you need it. Ask for help and then give the help. Like, as much as we want to help other people want to help us. So, allow that to happen.
A beautiful point. Sean, any final thoughts on this?
On the last point we were talking about, is it ever enough? Can you ever have enough? In my opinion, you can't. I will pursue till the end of my time. I want to know how big my box is, and I want to make it bigger. And that's all I got to say on that. Finally, on talent. Talent is an interesting word, maybe best understood through the past tense. So, you might have talent, but until you can put the ED at the end of that, talented, in other words, it's being recognized, then you don't have talent. Talent doesn't exist until it's called talented. And that requires action and reflection over time.
I don't have a ton to add on to this. It's just been an outstanding conversation, and it went down roads I did not expect it to, which is what I love when we have these types of conversations, because it makes me think, it makes me develop, and I can't thank you guys enough. The only thing I have to add on to talent here is the fact that it really doesn't matter. There are certain things that happen in life that are going to you're going to be able to apply it to or not apply it to, or engage with it or not engage with it. But at the end of the day, like Sean says, it's what you do. And that's what really matters, is the action that takes place. So if you think you have a talent, take action, go after it. If you don't think you have a talent in that, take action, do something else. But it really comes back to what you do every day. So as we all continue to learn, build, and grow, see you next week. Chimo.
Chimo.
Thanks everybody for watching and being part of the collective. If this has sparked any thoughts or resonated with you, let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us grow and keeps the conversation going. We'll see y'all next time.